In part 1, I presented evidence from primary and secondary sources showing Constantine's descent from the Flavian emperors and the distinguished senatorial family, the Calpurnius Pisos of Rome, both families of which were responsible for the creation of the New Testament scriptures, as is detailed in my book Creating Christianity, a Weapon of Ancient Rome, in which I investigate thoroughly the parallels between the New Testament scriptures and the work of the man known in history as Flavius Josephus. Part 1 ended with me explaining that, just like his ancestors, to Constantine, Christianity was simply a way to control how the slaves fought, so they would think they were doing the work of their god as opposed to following the commands of the emperor. Paganism was about the moment at hand, bargaining with the gods through sacrifice in hopes of a good immediate outcome. There was no concept of salvation. Everyone went to Hades, sinner or not. The offer to follow a religion that did offer salvation and made the slaves as important as their master would have had appeal. By this time, this new religion, law, had more scriptures written for it, to give the perception of some kind of history to it, whereas before, after the Roman-Jewish War of 70 CE, a long battle mainly between the Jewish sect, the Pharisees, and the aristocracy of Rome, there were only a few scriptures. Plus, the fact that the Pharisees, who changed their name to Rabbi, were still around after the war, meant they must have informed people the religion was false. The crisis of the 3rd century, 235 to 284 CE, saw migrations into Roman territory, barbarian invasions, and the armies spread too thinly. Emperors came and went. By the year 300 CE, the aristocracy was becoming divided and aware of how fatal the position of emperor was, and there was a devastating plague. Therefore, we can conclude that the people must have doubted their pagan gods were supporting them. Considering Constantine initially adopted the sun god Sol Invictus around 309 to 310 CE, after Diocletian left the imperial office in 305 CE, and we have contradictory accounts of the supposed vision in 312 CE and the issuing of the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, it is clear he wanted to revive Christianity, or, as the case certainly appears to be, bring it back from the dead. Christianity was a minority faith, but only in one sense. That sense is that only some members of the aristocracy wanted to promote it, and some did not. Those who did not were Diocletian, Galerius, Maximianus I, and Constantius Chlorus. Diocletian was in favour of the traditional Roman religions. The so-called persecution in the year 303 CE of Christians by Diocletian was, in reality, about the suppression of those members of the aristocracy who wanted to promote it, for example, Emperor Constantine. However, the persecutions would be presented in history as acts of martyrdom, giving the impression that the religion was moral and people were willing to die for it. As English New Testament scholar Candida Moss states, further, it's surprising that Christians could and did achieve power and status in the government, if, as tradition has us believe, they were being systematically persecuted by that same government. That both Valerian and, as we will see, Diocletian ejected Christians from public office demonstrates that Christians not only lived peacefully among the Romans, they flourished and rose to positions of prominence and power. However, that prominence and power can only mean that the Christian writers were members of the aristocracy. Again, as demonstrated on my site and in my book, it is only from the 4th century that, under Diocletian, Christians had to give their scriptures to authorities. For most of the centuries prior to Constantine, this religion, law, was not banned in the sense of a community of Christians being persecuted. It was not even a religion. It only appears to have been a growing religion because Emperor Constantine's ancestors portrayed it that way in their writings. Scholars are well aware of the exaggerations in the various literary sources available, both Christian and pagan. Pliny the Younger, the early 2nd century Roman governor of Bithynia Pontus in modern Turkey, is the first account we have of a pagan author to refer to the existence of Christians. In a letter addressed to the Roman Emperor Trajan, written in 112 CE, Pliny discusses the threat posed by Christians to the traditional Roman cults and indicates that he has initiated an official proceeding against them. He tells Emperor Trajan, who is related to Pliny the Younger, that the Christians are many of all ages, every rank, and both sexes. Pliny states, "The matter seems to me worthy of your consideration, especially as there are so many people involved in the danger. Many persons of all ages and of both sexes alike are being brought into peril of their lives by their accusers, and the process will go on. For the contagion of this superstition has spread not only through the free cities, but into the villages and the rural districts, and yet it seems to me that it can be checked and set right." It is clear Pliny the Younger wanted the above letter to sound serious. The Roman historian Tacitus, a few years later, would create his Annals of Rome, published around 120 CE. It presents an account of the empire from the reigns of Emperor Tiberius to Nero. Tacitus, too, mentions Christians. He portrays the cult as an immense multitude. Tacitus's mention is in regards to the Great Fire of Rome under Nero in 64 CE. Nero is portrayed as starting the fire and blaming the Christians. But there are many issues with this. One is the fact that Nero built many great popular buildings and structures before the fire. And the second is the fact that, in terms of the current understanding of Christian history, Christianity would not have been separated from Judaism in Nero's time. So here we have Pliny the Younger stating there are so many people involved in the danger, many persons of all ages and of both sexes alike, and Tacitus stating the number of Christians were an immense multitude. But other Roman writers say nothing. Only those known in history as Suetonius, Lucian of Samosata, and Gallon give very brief references. If Christianity had a large following and was such a threat, why did most Roman authors have little and, more often than not, nothing to say? The Roman historian known as Herodian detailed the careers of the emperors from 180 to 238 CE. He gave details about the threats they confronted. Any threats from Christians are not mentioned. We then have the exaggerated numbers of Christians portrayed in the New Testament. In Acts 1:14, after Jesus' resurrection, the number of Christians presented is 11. But in the very next verse, the number drastically shoots up to 120 believers. In Acts 2:41, Peter apparently converted 3,000 Jews and another 5,000 in Acts 4:4. In Acts 5:14, we read, "And believers were the more added to the Lord, multitudes both of men and women." The The supposed Christian author, known to us as Tertullian, exaggerates the most. He wrote the Apology. In it, Tertullian states, "The outcry from pagans is that the state is filled with Christians, that they are in the fields, in the citadels, in the islands." He also states that our members are so great, constituting all but the majority in every city. In Apology 37 comes his most famous excessive statement. "We are but of yesterday, and we have filled every place among you, cities, islands, fortresses, towns, marketplaces, the very camp, tribes, companies, palace, senate, forum. We have left nothing to you but the temples of your gods. For if such multitudes of men were to break away from you and betake themselves to some remote corner of the world, why, the very loss of so many citizens, whatever sort they were, would cover the empire with shame. Why, you would be horror-struck at the solitude in which you would find yourselves. You would have to seek subjects to govern. You would have more enemies than citizens remaining. For now it is the immense number of Christians which makes your enemies so few, almost all the inhabitants of your various cities being followers of Christ." However, other authors who presented themselves as Christians knew the exaggerated numbers were just that, exaggerated. Those authors include Minucius Felix, Latin apologist, who, writing years after Tertullian, presents the Christians as only being a few, and the man known to us as Origen, first half of the 3rd century, presents the knowledge that the Christian faith was unheard of in the empire. Based on the above evidence, modern experts reject the numbers claimed by the Christian authors. Christian forces were not destroying pagan religions in the 1st and 2nd centuries, and a new religion, law, was not an unstoppable force. British historian Robin Lane Fox has stated, "By circa 200, Christians still wrote polemically, as if the gods had fallen silent, but they were ignoring the contrary facts at the sites to which they referred." The evidence Fox is referring to is that of stone inscriptions, showing that pagan religions were flourishing in the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, as demonstrated by more than 300 pagan dedications at the Temple of Apollo in Claros. Christianity was nothing at this time, or even before, except for those members of the aristocracy attempting to promote it. It is clear that any promoting or building of an infrastructure for this new religion, law, was done on a shoestring budget. The elite had the means to pour money into it, but must have thought they did not need to. There are many people who have not understood the argument regarding the purely political reason for Constantine adopting Christianity. Some feel he would have enjoyed no practical benefit from the conversion. However, Christianity incorporated many aspects from different religions, and that was done on purpose. It was a purely aristocratic creation. Only the elite would have had the means to create the scriptures. Further evidence of this can be found in the publication The Origins of Early Christian Literature and Class Struggle in the New Testament, Chapter 5. The Gospels as imperial captive literature. Constantine was a great general and won many battles. Therefore, the mindset of the people would surely have been that the emperor was worshipping the correct god. He also gave benefits to those who converted in the form of promotions, tax breaks, and political advancement. Really, Constantine most certainly had the power and authority to fully adopt Christianity straight away. However, His strategy for promoting and using Christianity was a gradual, subtle political power move. He did not have thousands of pagan temples destroyed, nor were pagan worshippers physically persecuted. In a supposed letter by Constantine, the letter to the Eastern provincials, found in Eusebius's Life of Constantine, Book 2, chapter 48-60, presents the wish that all his subjects should convert to Christianity, but makes it clear that pagan worship was not to be suppressed by force. History tells us that change by force only creates anger, and, therefore, the ignition for rebellion. We do read about his apparent remarks regarding paganism from Eusebius, or the man known as Eusebius. It is understood he wrote to Sapor, the king of Persia, stating how he shunned the abominable blood and hateful odours of pagan sacrifices. Instead, he worshipped the high god on bended knee. What did happen was the funding of the temples by the elite declined due to the withdrawal of imperial favour, and, therefore, eventually rhetorical studies declined and the pagan ways fizzled out. Constantine's son, did destroy a few temples and abolished every sacred custom. Constantine focused on stripping the temples of their wealth and confiscating temple land, plundered some, and converted others into churches. To believe Emperor Constantine really had a powerful spiritual experience goes against all the evidence pointing to the contrary. To end, I would like to examine the Council of Nicaea called by Emperor Constantine in 325 CE, and also examine the reasons why the New Testament scriptures were translated from Greek into Latin. The Council of Nicaea seems to have been called mainly to discuss the supposed controversy created by a supposed separate sect called Arianism. The term Arian is derived from the name Arius, and those who are familiar with my work will know that the identity of the man behind the name Flavius Josephus was a man called Arius Calpurnius Piso of the Calpurnius Piso family. But in regards to the Council of Nicaea, the controversy was in regards to the doctrine of the Trinity, that is, the status of Jesus as God the Son in relation to God the Father. However, I believe that it is very possible that many more things other than the doctrine of the Trinity were discussed at this council. It is quite possible that the canon list at that time was discussed and debated. I also feel that because they were faced with various problems at that point, one of those problems was how to redirect attention away from the Book of Revelation, so that those outside of the aristocracy or the elite would have no way of knowing what was written or contained within the original Greek scriptures. This is where the odd decision to translate the Koine Greek scriptures into Latin comes in. Koine Greek was the lingua franca across the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East, and medieval Greek, also known as Byzantine Greek, was the continuation of Koine Greek up to the demise of the Byzantine Empire in the 15th century. Constantinople, named after Emperor Constantine, was the largest and richest urban centre in the Eastern Mediterranean, and it would remain the capital of the Eastern Greek-speaking empire for over 1,000 years. Therefore, the question must be asked, why change the language of the New Testament, a language which was understood by the majority, into a language that wasn't understood by a majority? The answer is one of control. During the time of Constantine, the aristocracy tried to change the number 666 to 616, but instead decided to translate the New Testament into Latin, so that, as just mentioned, the majority of what was there in the original Koine Greek could no longer be seen. But again, the translating of the New Testament into Latin makes no sense if using the current understanding of the history of Christianity and the languages understood by the majority of the people. By 1522, Martin Luther, a German professor of theology, had translated the New Testament into German, as the people could not understand the Latin version. Even today, Catholic masses are in Latin. Martin Luther wanted the people to be able to read the Bible themselves, and so he translated it from the original Koine Greek and Hebrew, which worried the church officials, as they no longer had strict control over the Word of God. The Book of Revelation contains the number 666. In Revelation 13:18, we read, "Here wisdom is. He who has understanding, let him count the number of the beast, for number is man's. It is, and its number is 666. So it is understood that this number reveals a name. The understanding within academia, and generally, is that the number reveals the name of Emperor Nero. And this is because of later Roman historians portraying Nero as persecuting the Christians. But there are many arguments against this that show Emperor Nero could not have persecuted any so-called Christians. There is another name that the number 666 presents, and that name is Flavius Josephus. It is known within academia that the work of the man known in history as Flavius Josephus has been very closely linked with the New Testament. Later Roman historians would depict Nero as the beast, including the man known in history as Suetonius, who would associate the number 666 with Nero in his writings. He would also state that Emperor Claudius had expelled the Jews from Rome for constantly making disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus, thereby historicising the story appearing in Acts of the Apostles. The Roman historian known as Tacitus also plays along. Logically, 666 and 616 cannot refer to Nero, as there is no basis for that reasoning. And if there is no basis for that reasoning, what we have then are past serious considerations for the number 666 referring to Emperor Nero. And if serious investigations into 666 referring to Emperor Nero can take place, I see no reason why other names related to the period cannot be taken as seriously. When critically examining the work of the man known as Flavius Josephus, we realise that, other than biblical literature, his work contains the only instance of the number 666. When we examine the name Flavius Josephus, in Greek, omitting the zeros as Roman writers would have done, we can realise that the name Flavius Josephus equals 30 plus 36, and therefore the number 66, and the number 600, which is represented by the chi in the Greek alphanumeric system, stands for Christ, because it is an acrostic initial for Christ. It is used to write 666. But why would the aristocracy try to change the number from 666 to 616? What does 616 represent? Well, we already know that 600 represents Christ, and the 16th letter of the Greek alphabet is pi, which can logically be seen, when all the other evidence and context is brought together, as an acrostic initial for the name Piso. So, therefore, I can see no reason why the number 666 should not be taken seriously as presenting the name, or names, Christ Flavius Josephus. Finally, in regards to the controversy surrounding the Council of Nicaea, and whether the biblical canon was discussed or compiled at this council, when looking at the bigger picture, it doesn't really matter whether or not the canon was discussed or compiled at this council at all. Again, within academia, we know that a biblical canon existed in the form of the Muratorian canon, which dates to sometime in the late 2nd century CE, and was discovered in a library in Milan in the 18th century. Interestingly, the Muratorian canon rejects several books on the grounds that they are recent and written by apparent fringe heretical groups. One of those heretical groups is led by a man known as Marcion. It would not surprise me if this Marcion fellow turned out to be either Justus Calpurnius Piso, son of Arius Piso, who married Matidia I as M. Annius Verus II, daughter of Salonius Matidius and Ulpia Marciana, or Marcion could be a descendant of Justus Calpurnius Piso. But at this stage, this can only be speculation. The fact that the Muratorian canon dates to sometime in the late 2nd century, and that all the evidence points to an aristocratic authorship of the New Testament, means that the Muratorian canon would have been compiled under the reign of Marcus Aurelius, who reigned from 161 to 180 CE. More information regarding the Emperor Marcus Aurelius can be found again on my website. A final point I would like to make regarding the Council of Nicaea is in regards to the number of bishops that supposedly attended the council. We read that Constantine had invited all 1,800 bishops of the Christian Church within the Roman Empire, but a smaller and unknown number apparently attended. Numbers in the historical record range from 250 to 318 in attendance. But if we examine closely these numbers given, we are presented with words and names associated with the Christian religion. For example, the cross, Jesus, the Septuagint, and the name Piso appears. To end, then, in my view, based on the evidence, it is clear that Emperor Constantine's supposed conversion to Christianity and supporting of this new religion, or law, was purely political. And my conclusion is based on the genealogical evidence presented in these presentations, and the contextual evidence, and the evidence pointing to literary techniques being used by the elite to disguise names within the historical record.